Hey, welcome back to the show. I'm here today with Jeff Gibbard, author of The Lovable Leader and runner of the Superhero Institute. He's going to teach us how we can all be superheroes today. Jeff, how the heck are you doing?
I am doing quite well. Thank you for having me.
Hey, glad to always have a fellow podcaster on the horn. Give us a little bit about your background and tell us about the show that you host.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a podcast host. I have a show called Shareable. I have another one I'm developing called Rogue. Both of them are really about just showing what's extraordinary about people, their stories, really valuable, bite-sized practical takeaways. I just wrote a book called The Lovable Leader. It's about bringing trust, respect, and kindness to work and building teams where love is a fundamental element of creating workspaces of great cultures and things like that. I'm really excited, really proud of it. It's my first book. And then I also, I'm a consultant and strategist, and I run a coaching certification program called the Superhero Institute, where I teach coaches the superhero methodology, but also how to become superheroes in their own right. So that's a little bit about where I currently am. Whatever you want to know about the background, open book, let's talk about it.
That's great. I love the superhero concept. I know that's big and plastered all over the movie screens right now. A lot of people are kind of worn out on the superhero thing. But let's be honest, like the superhero stories are some of the best stories. There was really all of Iron Man 3, Tony Stark is having just this breakdown from all the craziness he had to go through, launching a nuke through a wormhole, and he's having panic attacks and anxiety attacks, and he's really just trying to get it together in order to accomplish the mission. And isn't that like so many people out there just trying to get it together for 10 minutes so they can do whatever the thing is and get it done?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think the thing I've noticed as I study this stuff, I'm not just like a geek and enjoying it, but I also like to look at it from a multitude of different lenses, like thinking about it from like the psychology of superheroes and the hero's journeys and all those sort of like narrative structures of it. But the thing that I have found that's really most interesting about superhero stories that we rarely talk about is that almost every single superhero and every supervillain is born of trauma. Is something happened in their life that caused a pivot, a change, something to have to change in their life, and they chose one of two directions, either to protect people or to do what they think is protecting people or making a better world, but often harms people. And sometimes those that choose the path of protecting people sometimes harm people. So it's a complex world that I think we often think of as black and white, good guys, bad guys. But what I find fascinating about the whole world of superheroes is, what's the intent and what's the actual outcome of it, and really analyzing different superhero archetypes and seeing kind of what are the lessons we should take away that are positive and what are the things we need to watch out for.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I love the two things that you said in there. You said they're born out of trauma and then they make a choice essentially to be good or bad. When we talk, when I do different talks, I just spoke at a mental health conference, the Global Bipolar Disorder Conference, where I'm a child of a mother that has bipolar disorder. So I got to give my perspective how to stay healthy most of the time. What most people don't understand is, but there's going to be things that happen in your life. It's going to be good. It's going to be bad. It's going to be whatever. There's little T trauma, like people saying mean things about you, and there's big T trauma. We won't get into all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, regardless of who's responsible for the trauma, it's up to you to take responsibility for your life, move forward, get healing, and then choose what you're going to do with the rest of your life. And I love that you bring that into right there at the beginning, right there, talking about superheroes and their origin story and how they have the choice to do good or evil.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that, and I am 100% on board with the kind of the choice aspect, the individual responsibility. But I'm also very, very big into looking at systems and looking how systems influence the choices that we make. So I try to
Mm-hmm.
think of it on a really, really deep level of like, why would somebody make this choice or that choice? It's that whole story of the twins who grew up with an alcoholic father. One grows up, never touches alcohol. The other grows up to be an alcoholic, right? It's like the same environment, but there's different choices that are made, sure. But then there's also different experiences that both of those individuals probably had to make them choose one way or the other. So I also never want the whole superhero thing, which I think it often gets boiled down to like, individual heroism and all of that. I also try to think about what are the systems that surround that person and what are the communities that they're part of that sometimes lift them up to allow them to be heroes. In fact, I think one of the most interesting parts of any superhero story for me, the part that I spend a lot of time talking with my therapist about is the moments where the superhero is down, where they're knocked down, they're out, and somebody seemingly mild-mannered, normal, non-super comes and actually saves them. And it just shows that the resilience, the strength, it's the whole, Spider-Man, anyone can wear the mask thing. It's that we all have the opportunity to just make one different choice and actually step up for somebody else. And that's something I just find inspiring. And I try to live, every day through that lens.
Oh, that's fantastic. For those of you not watching the video, I did a big fist pump in there when he talked about the twins with the alcoholic father. I tell that story all the time. And the precipice of the story is when they're each describing their life, they both say it as, you see, my father was an alcoholic. I had no choice. They both thought that the other option was completely not available to them. The option to touch alcohol was completely unavailable, so they chose to never touch it. The other one says, I don't know how I can see it any other way. I don't have a choice but to do anything other than what I've been shown. They both took the choice, even though they had slightly different experiences in there. I'd absolutely love that. But the systems and communities, and you're right, like the superhero always gets down. Doesn't matter what archetype you're going through. It doesn't matter if it's Lord of the Rings and the weight of wearing the ring gets you down. It doesn't matter if you're in Star Wars and you've got to get your X-wing out of the swamp. It doesn't matter if you're Harry Potter and you start getting attacked and your friends don't want to talk to you and something happens. Through everyone's story, whether you're a superhero or you consider yourself a regular person, there's going to be those times when you get knocked down, and there's always someone that's going to come along, going to speak into your life, going to speak into your world, that's really going to turn it around for you and help get you back up on your feet and get going. I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I'm 100% with that. And I think those people are it's important for us to look for those people, not just like when we're in like the quicksand and we're like, help, get me out of here. But like to actually proactively think about the people in your life who are superheroes in your world. I have a couple good friends of mine that I was going through a real rough patch these past couple of weeks because of just a lot of different things that are going on in the country. I just wasn't in a good headspace to be writing or to be super productive as a business person. And I knew who I had to reach out to. My friend Yvonne, I reached out to her and she just, filled my cup emotionally and spiritually to just have a moment where I was seen, where it was okay for me to be vulnerable, for me to be open, for me to be down. And we just talked through it. And at the end of it, this cloud that had been hanging over my head for a couple of days was just gone. So I think it's important to think about the people that are already in your life who are going to fill your cup when you need it, and who can step up to be your superhero. And then how can you be that for other people? I always try to make everyone I interact with feel good about themselves. That's a core principle of like being Jeff.
Core principles of Jeff. This has
Yeah.
been my TED talk. Thanks, Jeff.
One day.
One day we need to make that happen. I'll put that on my little list of notes for you because I know people that organize these events and whatnot. We'll get you on stage, and I haven't done mine yet either. I got to figure out what out of the million things I enjoy talking about that I'm going to do my TEDx talk on.
Yeah. I've got two ideas for mine. One is called Becoming Superhuman, and the other is Why We Need Lovable Leadership. Those are the two. I don't know which one I'm going to do though.
Well, who says you can't do them both?
I just more about sequencing. You got to focus on one at a time, man.
Yeah, that is true. One at a time is always better. So tell us about the framework of what it takes to become a superhero.
Sure. So I think there's actually two elements of, let me actually back up. There are different phases I think that you go through. It's not like it's kind of like a binary of like, you're either superhero or you're not. I think there's kind of different stages. And the way I think of it is that you start out mild-mannered. Mild-mannered are people think that there's nothing extraordinary about them. They're just average, normal people, nothing amazing. And the first step is to recognize that you have a superpower. So the very first step towards becoming a superhero is to recognize you actually have some form of a superpower. And I think that first realization is the thing that unlocks the rest of the path in front of you, because after superpower recognition, you then have the opportunity to become superhuman. Superhuman is the ability to learn multiple superpowers, to continually enhance and grow yourself until you are a superhuman. And that's superhuman in terms of your abilities, but also in terms of how you are as a human, how you interact with other people, what your values and goals are, right? But you can fall from the path and take superhumanism into supervillainy very, very quickly if you don't have a code. And that's where I think that the superhero code comes into play. And that's what keeps you on the straight and narrow. So there are a couple of frameworks throughout that. I've got the superhuman framework, which is here's how I think you become superhuman. And then we've got the superhero code, which is after you've developed an understanding of what it takes to become superhuman. How do you become a superhero? You have to basically live these 10 principles.
Nice.
Where
I'm
do you
in.
want to
Let's. I
start?
want to know. I want to know more. So, if you think about yourself right now and you feel that you're mild mannered, that would it be safe to say you don't really feel like there's anything special about you? Kind of live a mundane life. Maybe you're on the hamster wheel of just going to work, getting stuff done, going to and from work, getting some money, so then you can spend money on the weekend, and you go back to work again to get more money to do the same thing. Is that what you mean by mild mannered?
Yeah, I think that's mild mannered. I also think it's somebody who is truly extraordinary in 100 gajillion different things, but does not recognize it themselves. Mild mannered is a state of mind more so than anything else. It's not
Mm-hmm.
actually about what the number of skills that you possess or anything like that. It's about how you see yourself. So I think of mild mannered as the state of prior to recognition of what your unique gifts are. And those unique gifts can be everything as small as I can make people laugh in a tough situation. It could be as something as extraordinary as I can walk into any room, own that room, pitch the heck out of an opportunity, and then close that deal on the spot. Like that
Mm-hmm.
could be a superpower. So I think that we often are conditioned by way of the way our education system is structured, maybe how our parents talk to us, maybe any number of the different things in our culture that cause us to think we're not as extraordinary as we actually are. And that's not to say every single one of you is a unique snowflake and we're all amazing and perfect and super. I just mean to acknowledge that we all have gifts. That's it. It's a very simple little thing to start with. So, I've acknowledged some of my superpowers over time, and I got really curious with how they happened, how they developed, how some of them are natural. Some of these are, I like to think that all superheroes are born of kind of one of three different ways, right? You're either born with it, a la kind of Superman. You are that in your very being. It's a thing about you. Like if you're tall, you're going to be able to dunk a basketball probably more easily, at least, right? So you're born with it. Something happens to you, some sort of catastrophe. It could be something like a mutation or bitten by a radioactive spider or something. Like there's a trauma that happens, and after that, you can't see things the same. That a lot of mine come from that. A lot of mine come from a traumatic event that caused me to think differently. And then the final one is you train for it. You're Batman, you're Iron Man. You learn the skills, you learn Krav Maga, you become the world's greatest detective. You commit yourself to a cause, to an idea. And I think those are the three pathways. And you kind of have to figure out, everybody's a blend of all three, right? There's things that you're naturally born with. There's things that something happened to you and you decided to do something differently and lean into something. And then there's also the things that you decide, I want to become good at this. I want to become great at this. How do I get better at that skill of becoming better at things? So everybody is going to be one. You're either going to be a Superman, an X-Man, or a Spider-Man, or a Batman.
Yeah, that's
And
very
sorry, I didn't mean to
interesting.
gender all of those as men characters. There's plenty of the others and female characters I could.
Well, those are like commonly wide known and
Yeah,
widely adopted and
they're
understood.
easy archetypes to point to.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to talk about another man like Michael Jordan, who had some basketball ability, had a
Yeah,
traumatic event by getting cut from his, I think it was a high school team. And then he
yeah,
went into Batman mode and realized, like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to outwork everybody? And went on to be the superstar that we know and understand as Michael Jordan. Like, everyone has some type of that journey. I know Jeff said you get to read a little bit of my bio before hopping on today, and if you haven't read my bio, you're gonna be like, oh man, like
yeah. You
this
really
is
should if you haven't read it.
like this is like oh this is like a hit to the gut. This is like a thing. Uh, those experiences are heavy and can weigh on you quite a bit, and it definitely took me a lot of growing, a lot of maturity, a lot of counseling, a lot of different ways to get out of that stuff. But then also understanding that I would be a completely different person if those things didn't happen to me.
Yeah,
What kind of person would I be? Like I one of the stories I don't tell very often because it really sounds really self-serving is I was saying my alphabet backwards when I was a kid, 3 or 4 years old, and my mom was like, "I want to know how smart he is," and had me do an IQ test, and it came back that I was either the top kid under 10 or I shared that same level of ability with other people. And to think, one of my biggest traumas was knowing that my family couldn't support me in that pursuit of knowledge and cultivate that. But I often wonder if the trauma and the different things that I used to say held me back, if those weren't there and I was able to use my unbridled intelligence, what would that look like now? Could it be amazing? Could it be wonderful? Could it be like some of these bigger entrepreneurs are doing, like Elon Musk really getting into electric cars, trying to take us to Mars and all these different things? Or would it have been used for evil? What have I have had that unbridled intelligence that was cultivated, but I didn't live by, in your example, didn't live with a code and was out essentially destroying people.
Yeah.
I've been watching Suits lately on USA and really getting into Suits. Have you seen Suits? Have you watched this
I
show?
have not. My wife really loves the show, and she tries to get. I'm like so limited in the TV that I watch it. Unsurprisingly, it's like basically all the Marvel shows and all the superhero shows, and that's mostly what I set aside my time for. And then occasionally something like an Ozark, but yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
have not
yeah.
seen Suits. But people have told me I'd love that. You know what? The other show that comes up all the time, people tell me I'd love is Billions. People all the time are like, Jeff, you would love Billions, and I'm like, conceptually, it just doesn't ring with me.
I don't know. I'm not a big TV guy. If I sit down and watch something, it's because like I want to watch the whole series, not because
Mhm.
I have something every week that I want to go see. I'm more of a movie guy because you can get
Yeah,
a small bite. You can disappear into their world for 2.5 hours and be really engrossed in it. And a movie is just like, or a TV show is like, that's a lot of commitment,
yeah,
like to get on board with a TV show. But I've been watching Suits a little bit, and it starts off pretty mundane, but it starts getting pretty diabolical with the way they work with different countries and they backdoor channels and all this stuff. And I could kind of like go back into my world, and like if I had the unbridled pursuit of whatever I was pursuing, I could see myself being diabolical. I
yeah,
remember being a manipulator when I was younger because I just needed, really, I largely needed to survive. And
yeah.
to be that kind of person full time, like it turns my stomach now to think about it.
Dude, but I think that's the point of like kind of where we started a little bit with the, the kid, the twins with the alcoholic father, right? Is that like the the environment you're steeped in provides sort of a substrate for something to grow, right? And
Mhm.
then there's a piece of that that you have an influence in, but you only have an influence in insofar as you understand what the different choices that are available to you are, right? So, just being intelligent, for instance, doesn't necessarily mean that you would go one direction or another. It also doesn't mean that you would have the awareness to understand the consequences of your choices. All that comes from like a variety of different influences or things that you choose to look into to learn more about. And it's like there's a whole discussion about like, how far down the rabbit hole of free will can we possibly go? But at the end of the day, I think the point is taken, which is that we all have the conditions to do certain things in our world, and we can look back on and say what if. But I look at it as like we're here right now, this is what we got, this is where we are, how much time we got left, what are we going to do with it?
Oh, absolutely. There's so many ways to go back and look at the potential regret, or we would have made another decision. Oh, if I would have only had known, I would have gone back and changed. Look, here's the deal. You never would have changed your mind
Yeah.
because you made up your mind at that moment with the information that you had, with the desires you had, with the mentors you,
Yep.
with all the information that you have. That's the one you chose, and you would never do it any other way. And you would never need to do it any other way. And if
Yep.
certain things keep recurring in your life that are maybe not what you would prefer, well, would you go ahead and learn that lesson already so you can move on to
Yeah.
learning the next lesson? Please,
Yeah.
dear
100%,
Lord.
man.
So people are in this mild managed stage and they finally get exposed to or hear the idea of or shown that they have a superpower, an ability, something that's just a little bit different than the vast majority of people. What does that stage look like?
So I think it's the introduction of belief. It is the idea that we are capable of more than we previously thought we were, and that's a watershed moment for a lot of people. Real quickly, when I was younger, much younger, like elementary school, going up to almost to junior high, I was in all advanced classes, everything advanced. And in junior high, my family moved to a new town, and all of a sudden, I wasn't so smart anymore. And it wasn't because I was a different person or anything. It was just that I had different priorities. I wanted to make friends at that point. And I was led to believe that, oh, no, no, we're much smarter here than in the district you came from, and this and that. And like, I just got a different idea in my head of who I was. And I carried that with me for a long part of my life. And it wasn't even until after I graduated from my MBA in my early 30s that I realized I could actually learn things, and I was actually very smart. And actually, part of the problem that I was having in my earlier years was that I had undiagnosed ADHD, and none of the systems that I was in were particularly well suited to deal with the way that my brain works. And when I finally realized, here's how my brain works, here's what I need to thrive, I actually started being able to thrive. And I think that that moment for me was where I was like, you know what? I've been selling myself short of what I might be capable of. And I think that's what it looks like for people in a lot of ways when you think like, when you recognize and acknowledge, I've got a superpower. And I think of my ADHD as a superpower. It's a disability, but it's also a superpower. And when I recognized that, I was like, okay, let's get curious. How can I get better at things? What works with my systems? Which is kind of how I led to develop the superhuman framework, which is learning, thinking, communicating, leading, and realizing, or action. So it's a 5-step process of basically learning and becoming able to do almost anything to unlock potential. You got to start with learning it, and you got to be able to think and process it, critically think about it, creatively think about it, really go through it. Those two you kind of have to swim around in learning and thinking for a while. Learn the thing, think about the thing, develop your new ideas, then test your skills by communicating it with people, share with people what it is that you know, and then establish yourself by showing leadership in that space. And once you have all of those skills at your disposal, then you can take action. You can take action with people. You can grow movements. You can actually make significant change on whatever it is that you're trying to do. So you don't always need all 5 of those pieces. Generally, I think you're going to need some element of those 5, but that's if you want to become super powered in a particular area. Those are the 5 meta abilities that you need. If you get better at learning, if you get better at thinking, if you get better at communicating, leading, and taking action, organizing your work, organizing your thought, organizing people, you're going to have the capacity to basically take on just about anything. And that only begins when you realize you can take on something, or that you did take on something and you've already got an ability. So that's how I tend to think about it in my head.
I really like that. There's the learning and then doing, and then the ability to teach the thing to a person and then teach it to a group or a team. When you walk through that little process there, you have to understand something at a different level in order to teach the thing. I remember
Yes.
being younger, probably in my early 20s, I would trying to be having a conversation with somebody, and I would say, "Is it like this?" And when I said that, I got these confused looks because I had gone 3, 4, 5 levels beyond the conversation and had
Yeah.
continued it in my head. And by the time I came out with the thing I was saying, they were completely lost. They weren't with me anymore because I had gone past the discussion. And I had that someone that came along like, "Hey, man, it sounds like you're continuing this thing in your head. Is that what you're doing?" I'm like, "Am I not saying that out loud?" They're like, "Yeah, no one else is hearing what you're hearing." So you have to be very cognizant of what is, where you're going in your head. You're playing chess like 12 moves ahead, but you can't have the conversation that way. You have to be able to speak with them and communicate with them where they are and make sure that they understand exactly what you're talking about before you're moving them down the path. And I'm like, I didn't realize I was doing that. They're like, yeah,
Yeah.
you're totally doing that.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good example of the importance of communication. And I think especially in a world where, um, growing up ADHD, I found that, and a lot of people who grew up with similar neurodivergent ways of seeing the world, we learn to put on masks and pretend like, oh, we're thinking just the way you're thinking. Oh, no, 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 we can do that. No, no, we don't. And I think that challenge of constantly keeping that mask up is really harmful internally. You feel
Mhm.
constantly like you don't know who you are, or like why you keep struggling with it. It's a lot of like questioning your own value and things like that. But the minute that I started communicating with people like, hey, here's what's going on in my brain, and realizing, oh, that's not actually what's going on in their brain, they begin to better understand me. I better begin to understand them. And we can actually get into a conversation together, as opposed to kind of like you, like, my brain's moving at 1 trillion miles an hour at all times. So when somebody comes to tell me a story, I've already figured out like 10 seconds into the story, 20 different possible outcomes of whatever that
Mhm.
story is.
Mhm.
I'm already there. So just either get to it or give me something that's a change of direction that throws me off to keep my attention. But like, if you're just going to get to the direction where the destination, I already know you're going, like, can you please just tell me that that's what's going to happen? Right. But if I don't tell people like that's what's happening in my brain, they just think that like I'm over talking or interrupting them because I'm like rude or something. But it's like, no, I'm just so eager and excited and I have so much going on. So I have a business partner. I have a business called Super Productive. We do productivity consulting, and we set up like Asana workspaces. We're Asana certified pros. We do Monday and ClickUp and all that stuff. And my partner is neurotypical and I'm neurodivergent. And I think that makes us really, really well suited to work with the companies we work with. Cause I'm like, yo, you're going to have people that are like me, and they're going to hate what Sarah's going to design. And then we've got people that are like Sarah, and they're going to hate what I design. So the fact that we communicate those two things and that we communicate that with our client allows really everybody to be included in that. So communication is such an essential element of being able to express whatever that superpower is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Using common language, being on the same page, at the same book, at the same time, all
Yeah.
that stuff makes a lot of sense. You mentioned about wearing the different masks, and I think that really applies to everyone. I'm a
Yeah.
different person with my kids. I'm a different person with my spouse. I'm a different person at work. Hey, Jim, love to be here today. Really excited to do the whatever garbage you're going to shove down my throat and force me to do and work overtime on the weekend. Glad to see you. You can have all these different masks, and I wanted to make sure I covered this, that wearing those masks because it's not your authentic self takes a lot of energy
It
and a
does.
lot of effort and can cause a lot of pain. Those masks don't fit seamlessly on our faces. Like they cause pain, and you can see it
Yeah.
in people when they have the mask on and when they have the mask off. If you really know the people in your circle and the people in your area, you can really tell the difference based on what they're doing. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and she's like, I just saw you switch into like business pitch mode when I asked you about this thing. She's like, I don't like it. Like, it's totally not you. Like, there's got
That's
to be a way to
amazing.
convey that stuff that you do it with your mask off. And love having people in my life that can actually show me the behind the scenes of who I am, because I get lost sometimes. I don't know who I am all the time.
I think that's a fair point, and I think those the moments where you've been more willing to let that mask down, and I can speak for myself. The moments where I know where I'm more willing to let the mask down is where I'm showing the courage to be disliked, which is I'm not trying to pretend for you anymore. I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm willing to let you dislike me for whatever that thing is. And I'm putting my faith in you that you're not going to dislike me
Mm.
simply because I refuse to fake it for you. And it's not to say that I don't wear masks in different situations. We have different roles. Sometimes that requires, different ways of showing up. So I'm not, ripping on the idea of wearing masks, but I do think that in order to get closer to being more of our authentic self more of the time, it requires a courage to say, you know what, I'm willing to be disliked in this situation if it means me being honest.
Oh, absolutely. And one of my favorite ways to showcase that is by asking questions. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a room and someone's teaching something, and being in the military for so long, there, I don't know if you know this, but there's a lot of acronyms, like a lot of acronyms. And acronyms are fantastic if everyone knows what they are, what they stand for, and it really is a shortcut to the next thing. Those are fantastic. Where it's not cool is when you're in a very diverse crowd of different experience levels, different backgrounds, different stuff, and everyone's already not up to speed. That's when acronyms can hurt you. So I'm like, no kidding, raising my hand, like, hey, what does that stand for? Hey, what does this mean? Hey, why are you doing that? And I get some dirty looks like, dude, you've been around for like 19 years. You don't know what this stuff is? I'm like, no, I've been in a different world, a different section of the Navy. The Navy is air, land, sea. We've got SEALs. We've got Seabees that do construction work. We've got all these different segments of the Navy to make it work, because we can do literally anything the world needs us to do. But I've been in the strategic world where we deal with nuclear weapons. I've got no idea what you do on your ship all day. I'm dealing with nukes in the Air Force. Like, do you want me to use some of my acronyms and see how dumb you feel? And they're like, yeah, no, let's not do that. I was like, so I'm going to have some more questions, and I'm perfectly okay saying that. I am never. Uh, I can't remember the last time where I felt uncomfortable or ashamed of for not knowing something. I can't possibly know everything. I can't.
But I would argue that in the conversation around superpowers, that's a superpower, dude. Like the courage to ask, to not know, to be willing to not know, it takes a lot of self confidence and self assurance to be able to do that. In those same scenarios, I often, even if I know the acronym, if I'm in a room with a lot of people, especially if I know I'm like somebody whose word or opinion carries a lot of weight, I'll sometimes ask what the acronym means, even if I know what it is, because I know there's people in the room that don't, and they're not willing to show up as not knowing. And I don't want them to feel I don't want them to be not included, and I don't want them to not be able to contribute their amazing ideas simply because they don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I love that. Someone's like, "What do you mean you don't know what this stuff?" Like, you speak with such confidence. I'm like, "Look, a long time ago, I decided that I could say any word that I knew how to pronounce with confidence, regardless if I understand the concept, regardless if I'm right or wrong, regardless if I have any clue what's going on. I can choose to speak the words that I'm going to use and speak them with confidence, even if I have no idea what's going on.
Another superpower, man. See, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to officially deem you as potentially superhuman. Jury's
Ooh.
jury's still out, but I'm seeing all of the signs.
Well, it's like I'm a superhero in training right now.
Yeah, I was going to say that's potential for a bad acronym, but I do think that that's a possibility.
Oh, that's fantastic. We were talking before the show got started about some of this stuff, and something I brought up was superhero in training makes for a not pleasant acronym, and it's a great way to rein somebody in that's kind of out of control. I'll
That
let
was
you
a good
do the
callback
work.
just for us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll let you guys at home do the work to see what superhero in training could stand for, and it's not sit. I'll tell you that right now. So then we've recognized that we have some kind of ability. We have a superpower. We have an ability. What's that transition into that next step of being superhuman?
So the superhuman framework is where I would start in terms of how to get there. But I think even before that, you got to kind of pick what do you want to do with your world, man? Like, what are you about? And I think it's really important for people to do a little bit of that soul searching of like, what's my purpose? What am I about? What am I trying to do in the world? I feel like I've been very lucky to be very clear on the type of impact I want to make in the world. And again, I mentioned it earlier, but I think for me that came out of trauma. My dad was a funeral director. On my last day of high school, my mom got into a catastrophic car accident with traumatic brain injury, 9 pints of blood, 8 hours in the OR. And I just immediately was struck with the impermanence of life and that, we don't get a lot of time here and we don't know when our number is going to be called. So I feel an urgency for self-improvement. And I also feel an urgency to leave behind a better world than I had.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what drives me. And it was brought about again by a lot of trauma and a lot of the environment that I was surrounded in. I think for most people, it makes sense to look at the things that have happened to you in your life, the things that have been challenging, that have been traumatic, any of that, and try to think, what's the lesson that I'm learning here? And how do I want to take the experiences I've had and try to ensure that other people don't have to suffer the same misfortune to learn the lesson? So I think once you uncover what it is that you're after, then you can start to develop your own kind of like lesson plan for yourself. Like, what do you want to learn about? What is your goal in life? What maybe positions do you need to have? What kind of work do you need to do? What kind of volunteering? What kind of relationships? What kind of skills do you feel like you need to round you out as the type of person to be the type of superhero to go on the missions you're trying to go on? I have the missions I'm trying to go on, and I know for that I need to understand people, and I need to understand what is the process that others have gone through to try and improve the material conditions of everyone on Earth. Like, how does that work? So I'm constantly trying to learn about that. I think a lot about that. I think a lot about ethics. I think a lot about the environment. I think a lot about a lot of different things, and that's part and parcel of what's driving me towards my goal. I'm not saying everybody should do that. I'm saying that's what mine is. So I would say if you discover that you have a superpower of some sort, that's awesome. That's a step in the direction of realizing you can do more. Now the question is, what more do you want to do? What are you after? Develop your lesson plan and then implement the framework, learning, thinking, communicating, leading, and taking action to grow that ability. And that's a starting point. You just keep looping through those steps. And once you've got that, then you can start taking on more things, taking on more abilities. That's kind of where I would go with it for people is, learning to me is the big one. That's where it all starts. You got to pick up a book, take a course, watch some YouTube videos, talk to smart people, but don't get static. Don't get stuck.
Yeah, it's really hard to do something if you don't know that it's available. And if you do know it's available, it's really hard to do something if you don't think it applies to you. So you got to know it's available, it's going to apply to you. You've got to actually figure out and learn something about it. And then even at that point, it's largely a nothing until you actually do something, until you actually take that action, get out and go do it. Again, we were talking beforehand about doing stuff, and I was talking about Jeff's over in Philly, and he's an Eagles fan, and surprisingly a Maple Leafs fan, and he's not happy right now because hockey playoffs aren't going well for him. He's a Flyers fan, and I told him I get to spend a week at a ranch playing football and hanging out with Fletcher Cox, who's an awesome D lineman from the Philadelphia Eagles. And he's like, "You just like do some crazy stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, I just want to do stuff. Like I want to go, I want to be with people, I want to be myself, and I want to go do and experience things." And there's so many things that can hold us back from taking those actions. I'm talking to a client earlier today about podcasting, and he's been stuck in his head. The voices in your head are telling him that he can't do it or he shouldn't do it. Those voices in there are there to protect you, to protect your ego, to make sure you stay safe. But just because they're in there squawking at you to stay safe doesn't mean that they're right.
I agree, man. And I think again, this comes back to courage. You gotta pick where you're going and then have the courage to interestingly enough, I'm curious about this because you're in the military. Do you know the difference between courage and bravery? Because they're used
Ooh,
synonymously. This is actually a
they
really
they
interesting thing. I
are.
looked into it.
They are. There's a couple differences, but I want to hear your take.
Okay. So I looked into it because courage is actually one of the 10 elements of the superhero code. And it originally was bravery. And I got really curious and I wanted to just look into the definitions of the two. Here's what I found: bravery is about heading into a situation without fear. That's bravery. Courage is seeing a situation, feeling the fear, and going anyway. Those are two very, very different states of mind. Bravery is in some ways like a crazy naive state of mind to like or just like you just something's broken that you don't feel a fear,
A
right?
lot of young men,
or
right? I'm
or
bulletproof. Can't hurt
yeah,
me.
or
Yeah.
you get to a point where you're so seasoned in a thing that you know how to be brave in that situation because you've done it so many times, right? That is a different thing. That's a level of mastery or insanity that just didn't actually resonate with what I was trying to say. What I was trying to say, and the reason I put it in the code, is that you're going to be scared all throughout your life. Anytime that there's significant change, anytime that there's obstacles in your way that seem insurmountable, you're going to feel that fear. You're going to feel that desire to just stop. And courage is saying, I acknowledge you, fear. I see you. I appreciate the lesson you're probably trying to give me. But in this case, because of what I value and what I'm after, I'm going to move forward anyway.
Hmm.
And I think that courage comes into play when it comes to choosing to go headfirst into an experience. It also, is part of what's going to allow you to persevere as you're running into the challenges of becoming superhuman in any particular way. You're trying to learn something. You're going to come into a point where you're like, man, I'm not as good as this as I thought I was, or this
Oh,
is getting really
absolutely.
tough, and you got to push through it.
Yeah, you might start off something with a little bit of a natural ability or a little bit of inclination towards something good, but by and large, when we try anything, we suck. We're no good at it. First time you do a fundraiser, let me tell you, you're probably not going to be very successful. First time you send an email, probably going to get some messages like, dude, what are you trying to say? Like, I don't understand what you're trying to say. First time you go to play soccer, if you picture the kids, largely they're picking daisies, they're staring up at the sun, they're waving to their mom, or the entire herd is chasing after the ball. Like no one's good at soccer at that age, right? Whatever the thing is, whatever you're going to start, whatever you're going to do, chances are you're going to be terrible at it. And I know that because I've done 140 some episodes of my own and 60 some odd guest appearances on other people's platforms. And when I started, I wasn't very good at being a podcast host because I had never done it before. I didn't know really what I was trying to say. I wasn't sure how to rein the guest in or direct them on a path. I wasn't sure on a lot of things. And it wasn't until I got 15, 20, 25 that I started understanding my voice and what I was trying to say and what I was trying to convey. But most people stop before they hit that first 25 and they never get to fully enjoy and be in the flow of the thing that they tried because they tried it twice just to make sure they didn't like it the first time, and now they're done. They're never doing that again. And how far are you going to get in life if that's your mantra for anything that you're going to try it twice and then be done?
Yeah, and you got to have resilience because I don't know about you, but I find that as I've been in any journey of learning a thing, let's just say drawing. You want to learn to draw, right? You're going to draw, and at a certain point, you're going to get to a point of progression, and you're going to look at what you did, and you're like, wow, that's really good. And if you keep going, what's inevitably going to happen is you're going to get to a point where you're better, and you're going to look back on what you did, and you're going to say, man, that really sucked. I'm not very good at this, right? And you may want to stop because you're not actually looking at the progress you've made. You looked at the previous iterations of success, right? And you're not appreciating that journey. So I think it requires a bit of resilience to look at the progress, especially if it doesn't feel like it's happening fast enough, and to keep pushing forward, to keep getting back up and getting back on the horse to get to that next level and keep moving forward. So, yeah, I think it also requires resilience.
No, it definitely does. My daughter was one of those oddities. The first time she tried something, she just crushed it. Like her first year bowling, she won the league. The first time she wrote poetry, she won a contest and got it published in a book when she was like 12. The first time she did a bunch of stuff, she crushed. Her like attempt was better than most people's full in. And she got into high school and she tried out for cheerleading and she didn't make the team. And it's a heartbreaking thing when someone tries out for something and they don't get selected. I don't think happy was the right term, but I really enjoyed, appreciated, I don't know what the right word is here. I really understood the process of life and I was happy. It's not the right word, but I'm gonna say happy. Happy that she didn't make the team. And people look at me like I'm crazy. What
Mhm.
do you mean you're happy she didn't make the team? I was like, she knows that she can't just give half effort and everything is going to be magical in her life. She
Well, it
knows
wasn't
that
about
she's
what happened. It was about the lesson, right? Like you weren't
about the
happy she
lesson.
didn't make the team. You were
Yeah.
happy that she had an opportunity
Yeah.
to not succeed at a thing, to learn how to get back up and keep moving forward.
Exactly. Happy that she had the lesson. It wasn't extremely painful. I'm sure it was a little painful, but it wasn't
Yeah.
like a house came down on her, nothing that crazy. So
Yeah.
happy that she got the opportunity to learn something like that while she was still, under the umbrella of our care, right? Where we could help her through that process and what that thing was. And it's just uh, so many people give up, they quit 3 feet from gold.
Yeah.
They get discouraged. I don't see the benefit. They're stuck in obscurity. No one knows who they are. They're like, you know what? Screw this. I'm done. I'm quitting. So many people in the nonprofit world are like that. They've been pushing. They've been pushing. They've been pushing. They're bringing some people around them. They're trying to do good things. They're listening to the Nonprofit Architect podcast and learning how to do some of these things. But they're getting in there, and they're so close to hitting that next thing that's going to bring them up to the public eye and to the next level. That's going to have money flowing for years. And they're like, I just can't do it anymore, and they quit.
It's such a shame though, because it's like on the one hand, I think the thing that keeps you going in there, and like my heart goes out to nonprofits because like they're the people out in this country that are putting purpose over profit. And they're really they have no profit, but you know what I'm saying? Like they're after something
They
that's
have
more
profit.
important. Well, I
They have
mean,
profit.
what I mean by that is like the profit goes back into the business. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying?
Yes.
So, and just serving the mission, right? So on the one hand, yeah, heart goes out to them. They're doing that thing, and focusing on that thing is what keeps you going. However, when you have in your mind a certain level and you're beating your head against the wall trying to get there, and you don't, it can be really, really stressful. But I think focusing on the process, it's the same sort of thing. In the same way, focusing on the process can be really discouraging. But when you focus on the process itself, the step by step, the day to day, the each thing that you're doing, and get kind of lost in the process of whatever it is that you're after, I would just encourage every nonprofit to really continually focus on the mission, what you're after, and get obsessed with the practice, basically the practice of going after what it is that you're after. Because you can look at those two things in two different ways. You can look at the practice and say we're not making enough progress, and you can look at the goal that you're after and say we didn't get there. But the purpose isn't to get there; it's to continually get better, and you do that by showing up day in day out. So it's tough, because it's important work, and you don't want to see it go slowly.
Oh yeah, Jim Rohn, a great motivational speaker from the 80s, and I think he got into the 90s. Said like set a goal to become a millionaire, not for the money. The money's great, but set the goal so the things that you have to do and the things you have to learn and the way you have to change in order to make that your reality. That's the benefit of setting the goal of becoming. Sure, the money's nice. He's like, I don't need
Yeah.
the money. I'll take the money, right? But it's the journey, it's the growth, it's the who are you becoming in order to make that thing a reality in your world. That's the real goal of what it is. It's not the result. So many people get to the peak, the pinnacle, the goal that they've set, and they said, now what? Or like, I got here and I don't feel any different. They ignore and they don't acknowledge the beauty of the journey and the things they had to do to get there. I'm not the same person I was at 22 years when I retired as I was at the day I started. I'm not the same person. First off, I just look better, obviously. But there's all these lessons that you have to learn throughout that time, and so many trials and tribulations and triumphs within there that make you into the person that you are now. And that's the beauty of the journey. That's the beauty of these big goals that people set for themselves.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Agree. 100%. Double stamped, underlined, bolded.
Jeff's just in his zen right now. He's like, oh yeah, just preach, brother. Let's hear
Hit it. Hit me with it, man.
it. So we've gone through these phases of superherodom. We've been mild mannered. We recognize we have a superpower. We become superhero and human. And then what's next?
So then it's just about, you got to live the code, man. So like if I gave you all the abilities in the world, what do they say? Absolute power absolutely corrupts or something like that. Whatever it is that like with great
Absolute
power, there must
power
come grace.
corrupts. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
whatever it is, with great power, there must also come great responsibility, right? So I think to a certain extent, it's really important to have a code that kind of keeps you in line with what you're out to do with your abilities, with the gifts that you have, and try to keep it focused on other people. So I came up with 10 different attributes that I think are really important for every superhero. I'll list them off for you. You've got responsibility. I define that as if you have the power or privilege to make a difference, that you use that and you do that. Protection. I think it's very important to be thinking about the ability to create safe emotional and physical spaces for others, taking accountability, rectifying actions in case something that gets messed up. There's self-sacrifice. I think every superhero has to have the ability to kind of like put the team on their back, to sacrifice their own comfort for the safety and well-being of those around them. It's being outward, it's being in service, so self-sacrifice is such a critical element of that. Courage, as I mentioned before, even though you're scared, you're going to move forward. Resilience, sometimes you're going to get knocked down, you got to get back up. You've got empathy. Empathy is super important, obviously, because you can't really help someone unless you can see through their eyes. You can't influence them. You can't connect with them. You have to be able to engage that empathy muscle and continually commit to it. Compassion. You have to be able to see people who are in trouble, and see the humanity in all of the people that you deal with. Vulnerability. I think this is really important for every superhero because it's very easy when you feel very powerful, like you have a lot of skills, you're on top of the world. The vulnerability is what allows you to connect with others. It's what keeps you down to earth, and it also reminds you not to kind of like get too far ahead of yourself. Like we all have vulnerabilities. We all have things that that are imperfections, that are things that we, that make us vulnerable. And then the last two are honesty and action. I think a superhero has to remain honest. You have to say things only that you know to be true. I don't think lying is very superheroic. And I think you have to commit to action. It's not enough when you go through that superhuman framework to constantly keep growing yourself and growing yourself and growing yourself, and then not taking action out in the world. So those are the 10. I have them hanging on my wall. I was just referencing them because, I have them in a specific order. And I think about them on the regular, try to think, am I living these superhero values? Am I living the superhero code? And I think that, as you develop new abilities, you have to constantly keep yourself in check by checking against these things. And that's so you can go out there and make the world a better place, not just for yourself, but for others.
Oh yeah, fully agree. I remember being a young man, and my ego could get out of control. Some of it was me being funny, and some of it because I really felt that way. And I had a guy who was like, "We're gonna have to bring in our head deflator kit so Travis can get out of the building and get back to his house today." I don't know how that whole head of his is going to fit in the car. And if we let some of the things that we do well get away from us, like we can cause a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say if you wanted to knock me off balance, just give me a compliment. I was fueled on all the negativity and the way you can't do this, you're not going to be able to do this. Like I was fueled by that, and that drove me for
Yes.
a long time. That drove me. And if someone messed up and gave me a compliment, like you're doing a good job, like completely would wreck my day because everything I was focused on was being fueled by the negative. And when
Dude,
I was,
I got to tell you, that resonates so hard with me
yeah,
because the best thing that anyone could say to me is, you can't do that. I'm like, I will show you. But the minute someone acknowledges or appreciates me, I don't know about you, how you handle this, but like, I actually just run through a script now in my head. When somebody gives me
really,
a compliment, yeah, like cause I can't even like, I work on this, but like, I have trouble sitting with it, like actually being in a compliment with someone when they're like really appreciating something.
hmm
I have to default to my fallback script where I'm like, thank you. That's really kind of you to say so. I really appreciate it. Like I just gotta like click word, just go into the routine because I'm so uncomfortable with the idea that like I did a good thing. I want you to tell me like, no, you can't do it so that I can like get back to where I'm comfortable.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
feel you on that, like real hard.
yeah. It took a long time to change that part of myself, um, and really getting more attention to something like podcasting was one of those things that helped me do it. And now, I mean, you've been podcasting for shoot like what 10, 12
9
years, so
years,
9
9
years.
years, I think it is.
Um,
Yeah, 9 years.
the more it happens, the more frequently it becomes, like you start to believe it. And
Yeah.
not that you believe that you're amazing, but you believe that it's possible. I I don't know how this ladies, I'm talking to you, right? You ladies are notorious for watching these romantic movies and like, oh, I just wish you'd say something nice to me like that, and blah 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 blah. Like it's so wonderful, and then you say it to them in some other context, and then they don't believe you.
Mm.
Like, oh, that's not true, or you're just saying that, or you're saying that because you have to. They won't. They want it. They desire it. It makes them feel amazing. It happens in real life, and they can't accept it because they don't believe it about themselves.
It's interesting. I would argue that I don't know if that's a lady thing. I mean, I think there's definitely, I have isolated examples that I can point to. I don't know if I would call it a trend, because I can also see it in myself. Like there's times where
Hmm.
my wife will say to me, like, "You're such a good father," and I'm like, I don't know how to, I don't know how
You
to deal with
instantly
that.
think of all the reasons you're a terrible father, right?
Yeah, I was like, oh, that time that I got so upset with her and this, like, yeah, I go through all of it, right?
Hmm.
Or, like you picture the, uh, like, I watch romantic comedies with my wife, right? So I know the stuff that's going on in there, and I see the way that the two characters might interact. And my wife is like Disney princess, man. She's like unicorns and rainbows and stickers, and it's like amazing. But she'll say things to me, that are like very much out of that. And when I hear it, like, even though like I want to like it as I hear it, and I do sometimes also still have the reaction very similar to like, "You're a great father." I'm like, oh God, I don't know if that's true. I could have done this. I could have that. I could have this. And I don't know, man. I don't know if that's like I think that's a human thing more so than anything. I
Yeah,
think,
that's a human thing. That's a
you
human
know,
thing. I can't say that's just ladies. That's just the example that popped in my head,
yeah.
or the differences between how me and my wife look at ourselves in the mirror. I know a
Mm.
lot of guys that'll walk by the mirror and they'll catch a little light and they'll be like, "Ooh, look at that! Look at that trap! I see that." Like they instantly picture themselves as this big, powerful person. And my wife will look by the same mirror and not see what I see, that she's a beautiful, amazing,
Oh, well,
talented,
we have the
powerful
benefit
woman.
of not constantly having all of the bombardment of signals telling us that we're not good
Yes.
enough. We got all the signals
Yes.
telling it. Like, think about the movies that we have where it's like the most average dude can get like a complete like the full package lady. Like that's the media that we get to consume. Like, no, you can do it even from
Yeah.
your basement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, but women have, unfortunately, there's the entire beauty industry, the
Mhm.
magazines, all of the different things that are,
These are all the
depicting
things wrong with
us.
top 10
And
things that are
yeah,
wrong with you in the mirror, and they walk
exactly.
by the
It's
mirror
just
and
a
they see all
constant
these little
self-critique and a standard that's impossible to live up to. Like we don't, and for better or worse, like we don't really have as much of that a standard to live up to. And I
uh,
don't think they should have to either. Because I hear you.
I get up and get on camera and I'm like, yeah, hashtag woke up like this because I don't do my hair, put on any makeup or any of that stuff. And then I have
You do
guests that
look
are
very
gals.
handsome. You look
Oh,
great.
thank you. Yeah, those of you not watching video, I don't know why you're not watching the video. I'm obviously really a gorgeous man.
Mine's just a filter.
Yours is just a filter.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
Snapchat filter. I use the Snap Cam. It avoids all
uh,
blemishes.
oh, that's perfect. It's so crazy the way that we talk to ourselves. One of the things I learned over the last year is that people will rarely treat you better than the image you have of yourself.
Will rarely treat you better than the image you have yourself. See, interesting.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the times people will treat you better than the image you have of yourself. And
really.
and maybe
I'm
that's
talking about
I
like
think it's
personal, like really deep relationships. Like your significant other won't treat you. Think about the woman that goes back to the the wife beater, the abusive person.
mhm.
The reason that they're stuck in that is the image they have of themselves. They might be able to break free and get away from that, but they will find the similar thing until they raise the image of themselves. They will
I
get
mean, I
right
think
back
that's
into a
one
similar
factor, but
relationship.
again, like from a systems perspective, I think a lot of times a lot of those women don't have anywhere to go. There's not a support network. There's just a gajillion internalized messages and things that people in those relationships have
But they
had. So
attract the same people. When they meet people in a different place, they attract the
I
same
mean, it's
type of person.
this is definitely out of my area of expertise, so I'll refrain from commenting on it. But it definitely seems like something that's an extremely complex problem, and
It is definitely not a
raising your self
straightforward black and
image is
white.
probably one component of it. But I would venture to guess that it is a cocktail of different
Oh,
elements.
absolutely. None of us are experts. We're in the opinion section of the podcast today.
Yeah.
Very, very there's so many elements. It's almost like we're getting political, right? Like you can like, oh, this is for this and this is for that, and if you don't believe me, like you're against me or whatever. Like
Mm.
there is so many different layers or so many different ways to get into this. And as we're talking about this, like it probably is not going to end up in the show. But Jeff, I wanted to thank you very much for being my guest today, talking about how we can all find the superhero within ourselves, cultivate that, how you can do that and apply it to your nonprofit. I really appreciate you being here today, Jeff. Check out his book, Lovable Leader, at lovableleader.com or wherever books are sold. Thank you again, Jeff, for being here with me today.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
If you like this and like what we're doing, I'm a professional podcaster. Jeff is a professional podcaster. You can go to nonprofitarchitect.org/resources. Pick up our ultimate and complete podcast guide. It's a complete DIY, do it yourself guide to doing exactly what it is that we do. And if you like that, be willing to take the next step. You can do our actual online accredited course through Forbes School of Business Technology. You can take it on your own, get it transferred into the university you're attending, or you can just take it for funsies because it's a lot of fun. You get to hear me speak into your life and teach you how to do all the great things. Thanks so much. Look forward to hearing from you next time.